you just got back from a 50-date seminar
60.
tour. Is that correct? 60-date seminar tour.
We did 60 cities in 60 days, all 48 states and Washington, D.C. We did a seminar every night and visited the whole country and had over 4,000 people register and attend our seminars nationwide.
I think that's, on its own, the only thing I can even, compare this to is an old punk band called Black Flag that tried to do 100 shows in 100 days. I've been on the road as a roadie and doing a bunch of other stuff and did a bunch of seminars. And for those people who don't know what that's like, that's a huge grind. And it's unbelievably impressive. And I did it in normal circumstances. You did it when we have a pandemic, when states are shut down, when people are scared to come out of their fucking houses with masks. My question, and you don't have to get political on here, that's not the whole thing. How was that experience? Because you've done seminars, you've been to, conventions, the Arnold, et cetera. How did that differ? How was the response different? How was just the feel? Were there people wearing masks? I know you had to change venues a couple of times. Let's just talk about, let's just appreciate the fact that that's an incredible endeavor that you did. It's extremely difficult. And then to do that during the times that you did it, that's 10 times as difficult as far as I'm concerned. Just walk us through some of the challenges that you had to face that otherwise normally you wouldn't have.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 cities in after I'd left the house, the resurgence of COVID cases started to rise in Texas and Florida, et cetera. And so people started shutting back down. I had thought everything was opening up, and I headed down to Arizona and then, New Mexico and across the Oklahoma. And so some people did have to cancel. Their gyms closed. And, when I left the house, I had 20 gyms committed to hosting, obviously about the first 10, and then, spotted throughout. And so I was still, DMing and emailing and calling venues to try and secure a place to host a seminar when I was driving down the street. I didn't do that before I left. So I would just put, I had a list of cities and I would just put TBA, to be announced, and let people know I was coming, but I didn't know where. I had no idea myself. And so my goal on the trip was just to keep closing, locations along the way. And I'd reached out to friends and asked them if they knew anyone in this area or that area. And I had a lot of help along the way, and appealed on social media if anybody knows anybody in this city that'd like to host. And so it was quite an undertaking in that regard. I was very fortunate about 4 cities in that I joined up with Bobby Summers, and he's a 13-year Army veteran who was an Iraqi war veteran, injured in the war, Purple Heart recipient. And he speaks now on PTSD and suicide prevention, specifically for the FitOps Foundation is what he's most involved in. And so Bobby came up to attend one of my seminars. And he called and said, "Hey, I'm in Dallas. Can I drive up?" I think it was... I forget where it was, but it was only about 2 hours north of him there. And he attended the seminar, and I asked him to speak. And then a few people came up to him after the seminar and had disclosed that they have had suicidal tendencies and were depressed. And Bobby talked to them for quite some time and gave them his DM. And he really felt like he helped those folks. And so Bobby asked me if he could follow along and do, a few more seminars and kind of take a little loop until he got back down to Dallas. And I said, "Park your car, you can go with me, and I'll just drop you off in Dallas." And he parked his car, and we did the next 5 seminars together, and he opened with a presentation about, mental health. And it was pretty compelling that he was there during this time, because there are a lot of people who did get locked out of their gyms, which is such an important part of most people's ability to relieve the stress. And a lot of people look to their gym as, kind of as where they worship, where they, their sanity is maintained. And I've kind of felt that throughout my life. At the times at which I wasn't able to train, I talked about my stress. It just seemed to be almost unmanageable when I wasn't able to lift. So, we did about 5 or 6 seminars together, and we got down to Dallas. Bobby said he wanted to do the rest of the trip, and fortunately, he shared the driving. He actually did the lion's share. Bobby was after he got blown up twice in Iraq. He was a driver for some of the military brass, and he would drive all over Iraq, and so he was quite comfortable helping me, and we traveled the country together. And what we found is that a lot of those people that came together, they were frustrated. They were fed up. They didn't care so much. I think that they were a little less concerned about their potential for significant problems from COVID, because they're a younger crowd, they're a healthier crowd, and we know that statistics are showing us that the average age was 84 with comorbidities. Over half of the people who passed away from COVID were in retirement homes, and so it seemed to be pretty isolated to immunocompromised, elderly, comorbid circumstances, and the younger folks were really just trying to prevent passing it on to people who might be more susceptible. But I did try and stay out of the politics. I think that there's we did a lot of good by, physically and mentally, by getting people together. There's been a huge increase in domestic abuse, in child abuse, in suicide. All those things have skyrocketed as a result of the lockdowns. And so, it's kind of a mixed bag. It's a bit of a difficult challenge to, who do you protect and how do you protect them, and who's sacrificing as a result. I didn't try and get into it too much. I didn't talk about it much during the seminars. People attended at their own discretion. Some wore masks, some didn't. Some gyms required it. I didn't care. I wore a mask all throughout the country every time I went into a store or a gas station or those kinds of things. And I'm not out here trying to be political about any of that. I'm just out here trying to help where I can help. People were very, very grateful and thankful, and they lined up to shake my hand and to tell me stories about ways in which their life changed, and it was just such an emotional journey, both with Bobby there in terms of the psychological aspect and the things that people were able to do to improve themselves physically, and in so much as they were able to utilize some of the information that they heard from me on a podcast or in the vertical diet. They wanted to share that and thank me, and whatever life-changing experience that they wanted to express. They just wanted to make sure they thanked me personally. I could have done a webinar. I could have done one webinar at home and reached a similar amount of people. But in my mind, I think that it's much more impactful to see people, to shake their hands, to listen to their story personally. And I would spend, sometimes a couple hours after the seminar taking my time to talk to every single person, answer their questions, and listen to their stories. And so it's invaluable, the relationship building that was done just by being able to be there and see people in person.
And again, I was so stoked for you. If Bobby wasn't going to call you, or if he wasn't on the RV, I was about to call you, and I wanted to come along too, because I thought that the world, especially our industry and all of our people, if you will, really needed that. And when everyone was running away from something, you ran into the storm like a true stud, and I think that's so commendable. Can you chat a little bit, or this is just, kind of another question. Hearing Bobby speak and getting to talk and spend some time with him, did you find any parallels or any sort of more connections with PTSD, suicidal tendencies, et cetera, with obviously, mental health with physical health? Has any of your thought processes changed as far as what can diet and workout do for people's mental health? I mean, we all know that, again, going to the gym is church, was there any other more parallels? Could you see anything else that, really solidified a little bit more of a thought process, or something that you thought was there, and then you kind of figured out, oh, there's no question that this is there?
Yeah, I've seen that for years in doing seminars all over the world. I've seen people who have said when they got into a weight training program and started really exerting themselves, that their mental health improved significantly. I would never be one to claim that it's a cure or to dismiss the severity of people's personal circumstances mentally, whether it be for suicide or stress or anxiety. But I consistently do see and hear that people at least experience some relief of the frequency and severity of the symptoms, if not make it completely and entirely manageable long term, so long as they're investing themselves in better health and fitness. It's exactly what I covered in my Stress for Success rant. When people really focus on improving their body composition, losing some body fat, sleep is just a monster there. That's some of the work that I did with Dr. Gomanak. She was a 30-year neurologist who used to prescribe medications for things like fibromyalgia and migraines and anxiety, who just went full bore onto sleep. And now that's all she does is consult all over the world on sleep optimization, because she found that it had such an enormous impact, and exercise being a component of being able to sleep better. And that's everything that she does now. And of course, I talk about the CPAP and its benefits for sleep. But it's huge, and that's why barbell medicine exists. Barbell medicine. They lift weights as a prescription. Yes, some people do need medications for for some illnesses and mental and physical, but that should be concurrent with a program of weight training and optimizing sleep. And I even think gut health, because we know that that's related to mental health as well.
Yep.
Certainly connected, which is why I have such a big focus on digestion and helping people with the kinds of foods that they can eat to decrease gas and bloating and eating disorders and things like GERD. I can't tell you how many times I discussed acid reflux and ways to cure acid reflux, and told my audiences that it was very common for people who would go in and get antacid medication to very shortly thereafter end up back at the doctor's getting antidepressants. And people would come up to me and say, "I thought you were talking to me." And I saw it over and over and over again, where that gut-brain connection and those anti-acid medications preventing people from breaking down proteins and absorbing minerals and electrolytes, and was causing them depression. Same with sleep and sleep apnea, causing depression. Same with lack of exercise and excess fat, which we now know has its own hormonal component, which we didn't think. We thought it was dormant before. Now we see that there are hormones that are released and suppressed by fat accumulation. So all of those things are relative. They go a long way. Not stepping in between an individual's mental health and their psychologist or psychiatrist and their medication. I'm just saying that in all cases, whether it's mental or physical, it's never any one thing. And when I talk about things like my high blood pressure quick fix kit or my high blood sugar quick fix kit, there's 12 or 15 items on each of those, and you have to do them all. There's no magic pill, powder, or potion, and one component isn't going to, completely fix the problem. So I put together checklists, and I make sure that people are compliant with, if possible, all of the things on the checklist in order to get the results that they want.
So thank you for that. I think that was awesome, and I think it's amazing, and I think everyone kind of understands that, but to get to understand it on a deeper level is pretty amazing.